What's up guys, in today's video I want to show you a really powerful trick that you can use for both a hard surface modeling workflow and also for a sub-D workflow. Let's go. Now this technique is a little bit advanced, so if you're new to Blender, new to hard surface modeling, new to any of this, we do have a program called the Hard Surface Accelerator. You'll learn Blender in 1 to 2 weeks with just 30 to 60 minutes per day of work, just like all of our students have done here, and I'll link that program in the description below so you can check it out. So although this is an advanced technique, it shouldn't be too difficult to wrap your head around. I'm going to try to explain this as easily as possible. So what I have here is I have two duplicate shapes basically. I have one called plain clean, doesn't matter what you name it, and then I have another one here that's just a duplicate. Now the reason I named this one plain clean is because this one is going to act as our quote-unquote clean mesh with clean shading, just everything looks nice about it. Now these little edges you see right here, that's because I have cavity turned on. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for this tutorial here so it's easier to kind of see this shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this one turned on, alright? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply just one level of sub-D to make this a little bit smoother, and I'm also going to, actually we'll just leave this alone for right now, that should be fine. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to, maybe we'll go over here, and I'm just going to take some of these faces and just delete maybe this area right here, okay? So basically what I have is I have a hole just from deleting those faces, and the sub-D right here is kind of rounding out these corners, right? This isn't necessarily an issue, but if you wanted to kind of tighten up these corners, you would have to go in here and do something like this. And the moment I start doing something like this, you, if you've been using Blender for a while, you probably know we're gonna get these very harsh kind of transitions right here, because basically this geometry is no longer, nice and consistent. We kind of have this proximity loop right here causing a problem. And this isn't the end of the world, but it's also not ideal. So usually what you want to do in these cases is you want to fix that shading, okay? Now this isn't necessarily the best solution. If you were to say deform the object, this could actually be a bad strategy because you want the geometry to be consistent when you're deforming an object. But for shading purposes, this is totally a valid technique and I would recommend using it. So what we can actually do is we can take this object right here and we can use this as a guide mesh essentially and shrink wrap this topology to this one right here. And this is going to clean up the problem very nicely. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to add modifier, I'm going to go to deform, shrink wrap, and we're going to choose that plain clean as the object. And you're going to see this didn't really do too much, it just kind of made it worse. The reason that happened is because I'm using a sub-D level of 1 on this mesh, while this one is not using a sub-D at all. So this one is lower resolution compared to this one. You do not want to shrink wrap a higher resolution mesh to a lower resolution mesh because this one has less faceting and this one has more faceting because it's lower resolution. So to fix that problem that we kind of have going on right here, it's a very simple fix. We go in here, just add one level of sub-D, and now everything is going to look very, nice and clean. And you can see, exactly what this did. This is without the shrink wrap. You see these really harsh transitions right here. And with the shrink wrap, it kind of cleans that up very nicely. So this is a very useful strategy if you just need to clean up that shading. If you're designing like organic shapes, this can be very useful and very powerful. Now, in other situations, this isn't necessarily going to work. So for example, let's say I'm using like a Boolean workflow and I went in here and I'm just going to run a Boolean just kind of in this area, just like that. Now, in this case, it doesn't actually work. In this case, you still have these shading problems, and unfortunately, even with the shrink wrap, that's not going to fix it. And here, the whether the Boolean's above or below it, it's not going to, fix the problem, right? So we have our sub-D. Let me turn all these off so you can kind of see what's going on. We have the sub-D going first, right? Sub-D going first, and then we have, this is just the Boolean I just added. And then of course we have the shrink wrap, which is cleaning up this area over here. But the shrink wrap isn't going to actually do anything for these shading problems here in this area. Unfortunately, it's only going to work over here to kind of shrink wrap, you know, this portion, as you can see, right? So what we actually need to do here instead is use a data transfer modifier. So in this case, we're going to transfer the shading over. So I'm going to go to add modifier, and then I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to go to data transfer, and then I'm going to choose that source object, the plane underscore clean, face corner data, custom normals, and then projected face interpolated. You've probably seen this in other tutorials before. It's the same strategy. And that's going to actually clean up the shading over here very nicely. Now you might be wondering, why do I even need to use the shrink wrap if I can just use the data transfer? Now if I just go ahead and turn off the data, or turn off the shrink wrap, so I'm only working with the data transfer basically, you can see it actually does a pretty decent job, right? Whether I turn the shrink wrap on or off, it's pretty good. But depending on the distance the geometry is from this guide mesh, this may or may not work. In this case, it actually works very nicely. You can see whether the shrink wrap's on or not, it doesn't really matter. But let's say, you know, this geometry here was a little bit, let me go ahead and just kind of move this up. Let's say the geometry was kind of moved up a little bit like this. It was slightly, you know, not matching this, this mesh right here. It was slightly above it, right? You're going to see with that, you know, the data transfer is still kind of picking it up, but I don't know how well you can see with YouTube's quality. It's still not really, you know, as clean. So even if I move this around, yes, the data transfer does a pretty decent job, but as you get more and more aggressive with it, it doesn't actually work very well. The data transfer breaks. So basically what the shrink wrap would allow you to do is it would allow you to kind of apply or shrink wrap the geometry back onto the base mesh basically. So now if I go in here and turn on that shrink wrap, you're going to see that kind of saves us in a way. So you don't necessarily need the shrink wrap, but if your objects are slightly inconsistent with each other, you probably do want to use that shrink wrap to kind of push it back into the right position. And you're going to see by doing that, we first have our shrink wrap, and then we have a data transfer, which you know, helps clean things up. So depending on, you know, your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, you may need one, you may need both, you may need the other. It really depends on what you're trying to do. But this is a very powerful strategy because you don't have to do anything crazy. All you need to do is use a mesh that pretty much resembles the one like this, and then you can use this as your guide mesh essentially. So as long as this one's here in the scene and hidden, you can always use that one as a reference and use both a shrink wrap and a data transfer to clean everything up. And just to kind of recap here, I'm going to turn off all these modifiers. So first we have our sub D, and then we have a boolean, which is just over here. And then the shrink wrap is going to fix this, basically this mess, because this, as you can see, this is slightly above the mesh right here. So what the shrink wrap's going to do is just project it back onto the, you know, original part. So we turn that on, it's going to project it, turn that off. You can kind of see what that's doing. And then finally the data transfer, whether or not you need it over here, it'll help kind of clean it up a little bit, but over here is really where it's going to clean up those nasty shading artifacts. I just turn this on and boom, we have very, very clean shading, even though, you know, we have some n-gons over here on a curved surface, and even though over here we have some extra loops where we normally wouldn't want them. So very, very powerful strategy. Would highly recommend using it, and this is just super simple and is going to save you a lot of headache with shading. So very quick tutorial today, guys. Nothing super complicated. It is a little bit advanced, but at least you know how to use this now. And again, if you're brand new to Blender, brand new to hard surface modeling, check out our hard surface accelerator course in the link below. We have had thousands of students complete this course and learn Blender in under 2 weeks, very, very quickly, and we'll get you the same results in the same period of time. So again, I'll link that program in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.